Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final day of the symposium. Also today we have a very exciting agenda, but before diving into what we'll see today, I would like first of all to thanks the organizing committee, the partners, the volunteers, and also the sponsor, RoboSuccess. And then do a very short summary of what we have seen yesterday. It was a very exciting day. So we started with a keynote from Katie Wu from MIT about eco driving for the planet, so and how different and how it's possible to think about autonomous driving solutions that can optimize in driving to minimize environmental impact and how AI can accelerate their deployment. We then look at a panel on Earth and ocean observation. So it was a very insightful discussion on how robots can help to collect data that we need to calibrate our models and to improve our prediction on climate change, for example. And we look especially at what are the technology challenges of deploying these robots in very extreme weather conditions like wind, gusts or current under the oceans, and also about their sustainability and the reusability of robots in this context and how eventually we can retrieve the robots once we have deployed them into the environment. We then had a second panel on funding, climate robotics, also very interesting, especially discussing about the opportunity for founders to look ahead for problems that they can solve in the future, in the next 10 years, when basically their technology would be commercially viable, more deployable, and also reliable. The panel also discussed about what are measured drivers for this problem, especially looking at the fracturing of global supply chain and the deglobalization. So they need to gradually restore manufacturing locally, and as this can be, of course, an opportunity to bring more and more robots for the sustainable production and also manufacturing. Specific fields are, for example, clothes due to the whole issue related to fast fashion, but also construction industry. And then the final panel was about recycling management and of course robots, and especially how can we deal with the huge amount of waste that we produce and the opportunities for robotics to upscale these recycling and management actions that we need. And I think here was very interesting to look at what robots can do for the management of dangerous e-waste, like, for example, batteries for EVs, but also, again, connecting to what we have discussed before, also potentially clothes that are very complex to manipulate for our robots. And finally, of course, we look also at the need for more responsible design and standards, and also, of course, ethical structure to basically assess the risk of deploying our robots and potentially to also assess their sustainability. So these a bit conclude the summary for yesterday, and this brings me to what we will see today, starting from our keynote. So yesterday we talked about management of the resources of our planet, and I think that one of the most precious one is life itself, and life unfortunately is disappearing at an unprecedented rate. Life or biodiversity, it's made by many creatures that are invisible very often to us, but sustain the very system that we depend on: food production, clean water, clean air, and countless other processes that keep our planet and our economy alive. So that's why we need to do something, but very often our effort to restore and to preserve biodiversity falls very short, and that's largely because biodiversity is very difficult to measure. We're talking about surveying hundreds, sometimes thousands of different species across many ecosystems. So current survey methods do not have usually the right scalability, taxonomically, spatially, and temporally. So 5 years ago, the XPRIZE Foundation launched a global competition to accelerate the development of technology to survey biodiversity in one of the most iconic environments on Earth. These are the rainforests. And of course, this is about technology, it's about robots, it's about AI, but it's also about people and how biologists, engineers work together and collaborate with local indigenous communities, which are really at the forefront of this crisis. And so to tell you everything about this, I have the pleasure to invite on stage the winners of the XPRIZE Rainforest competition, Thomas Walla and Guillaume Caron. Um, so let me do a brief introduction before leaving the floors to you for the presentation. So Thomas Walla is the team lead of Limelight Rainforest, so the winner of the XPRIZE competition. He's a professor of biology at Colorado Mesa University with a long-standing background in tropical ecology, biodiversity monitoring, and insect-plant interactions. His current work focuses on advancing ecological research and conservation through innovative tools and species identification. And then we have also Guillaume Caron, who is a co-founder of Outreach Robotics in Canada, a pioneering company that leverages drones and cutting-edge technology to develop innovative tools aimed at assisting botanists in their conservation efforts. So welcome, thanks a lot for joining our symposium. I leave the floor to you for your presentation, and I want to remember the audience that, of course, they can ask questions, they can post questions in the Q&A, but also in the chat. So after we will have time to interact directly with the speakers.
Hi guys. Do you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Stefano. And yes, we'll be discussing about the XPRIZE, the technology we developed to bring those into the rainforest. And we'll separate that into two different presentation. I'll be starting with the robotic part, and then Thomas will move on with more of the results and the measurements that were taken in regard to biodiversity. So I'll just share my my presentation. All right. So let's move on. So the title is Drone Deployed Scalable Solution for Biodiversity Monitoring. And I'll just do a brief introduction on our company, which is Outreach Robotics. I personally have a mechanical engineering background from Sherbrooke University in Canada. And we founded this company in 2019, developed a bunch of different robots to help biologists in the field. A few of them, our most famous one is the leaves, which helps collect tree branches on top of the trees, just like a blood sample from trees to help researchers in their studies of forests. And then also we have developed a Mamba, which is a stabilized platform to sample very rare plants on cliffs. And then I'll move directly to the main subject, which is the XPRIZE Rainforest. And kind of our background has led us to meet Thomas Walla for that competition and develop all the robotic part of the solution that we needed to deploy in that 24 hours within a plot in the rainforest. And the major constraint there was that all solutions needed to be deployed and retrieved by remote solutions, so we could not access by foot into that area. So we needed to think about ways to deploy and then retrieve all the technology on the ground to take those measurements for biodiversity. So 24 hours is quite a tight schedule for doing all of that. It needed to be very well thought on how to deploy in the field, and it's not like near a lab, so it's really deep in the forest. So you need to know that we had to think about all going from battery charging to be able to communicate with those robots. So it was a challenge, and yeah, it was very fun to do. So we'll dive into what exactly we did there, and we'll start with a short video just to give you a visual of what it looked like. And you can definitely find that video also on YouTube. So we were using multiple drones to deploy the the canopy raft we see there. It's called the Limelight station, which can host multiple different sensors. The idea was to use the canopy as a floor, so it's very tight, very dense in those tropical forests. So we could just drop those kind of umbrella-shaped sensor platform on top of trees, and we did that different payloads there. So we had camera trap for insect. We also had the specimen collection for insects, and also acoustic sensors there to track the birds. So that was also an exciting part where we did actually locate birds with their song, triangulate their positions with our platform in the trees. As well, on top of that, we did the water sampling through the trees. So you can see there very tiny, narrow spaces where we could find water streams to drop the water filter we developed. So you see there, it's currently filtering through a little stream in the tropical rainforest. And this is the place where we took off and did all the analysis on the ground. Um, and it was fun. Yeah. So let's move to the next slide, maybe. So you just saw in the video we did a different platform. There is one which was more of a camera trap, and the other one was specimen collection for insects. All of those needed to be deployed, so we did develop also a way to drop them and capture them. It was a simple grasping system we used, suspended with a universal joint under the drone, and we did capture the hoop and just drop them. Um, it's quite easy to just capture them, and let's say you miss your shot, then you can just reopen and try again. So it's not very stressful on that part. And it was, well, the main hurdle was to find the right trees to drop them, because you have a 2D perspective from top, and you want to have a tree which is dense enough to be able to just lay down the raft on top, and so it does not go through the tree, and or it does not fall on the side. And also we had another payload, which is a winch, to be able to use the water sampler you just saw. So yeah, that's just diving a little bit more deeper into the payloads that were on these two rafts. One, which was the specimen collection, has a typical malaise trap and a pitfall trap. The camera trap, we did develop our custom camera system to collect pictures and to attract the insects during night. It was cool because although, well, we deployed 10 of these rafts, and they were on a timer, a GPS timer, and they were set to start at like 6 p.m. And we didn't know if it was going all light up at the same time, but that view from the drone when it just turns 6 p.m. and all the lights turned on in the forest, that was quite special to see. So yes, they were running on each raft. They had a GPS to have coordinates as well as the clock. And also they have a power distribution board, batteries to be able to power all the different payloads. So it's quite modular. You could easily adapt it to put other payloads into those rafts. Also, on each of the rafts, we have 8 microphones. And those 8 microphones are able to identify which direction the sounds come from. So when you hear bird, you can pinpoint like which orientation does that bird was. And when you add up at least 2 of these rafts, you're able to have a better sense of where that sound came from. And then if you have a third one, then you're able to locate pretty precisely where you have heard that bird. So that's a very neat designed to be able to count birds and to count flocks in the future. And also being on top of canopies, we're able to hear from further away. So we did, I think rafts were kind of placed 150 meters apart from each other. And we found that was a good range to be able to track easily the birds. And you can see like in that figure, different the white-throated toucan and channel-billed toucans, and you can kind of see there's a separation on the plot, and that was caused because of the really a hill, a slope in the ground, and that was one of the measurements we've been able to do, which kind of good did good results. If I move quickly to water and surface sampling, we did not collect water, we just filter it on the ground. So that helps us be able to filter a large amount of water without having to carry it back. We did collect like tiny samples just to do the like little measurements, but most of the eDNA that comes out was from a simple filter there. So we were able to filter up to, I think it was 54 liters of water in 3 different spots. And that did give a lot of results on the biodiversity there. And oops, I did skip too quickly. I'll just move back here. All right, so and after that, we dove down a little bit deeper on the camera trap design. So after that competition, we did continue developing some of the tools we had during the final. One of them was the camera trap, and it led to a new design, the AntoCam, which is quite easy to deploy, low cost, waterproof, to be able to do that automated monitoring of insects. So that's one of the outcome of the competition. And as well on the R&D side, and also on the engineering trip side, we decided to do automated landing for drone. So that drone right there is doing a automated landing. So it does have a sequence where it scans with a RGBD camera, reconstruct the tree, then identify with different parameters where's the best landing zone, and then does its automatic landing. So we can foresee in the future having, instead of a raft dropped by a drone, you could have a drone that travels a certain distance, then sits on top of a tree, recharge batteries, and gather biodiversity or acoustic data, then continue its mission just like a scout in the forest. So that's one of the outcome we did with that project. And if you have any question on the robotic side, I'll be happy to answer them. And I quickly give the talk to Thomas, which was our famous team leader of Team Limelight, and now a good friend. So you can go ahead, Thomas.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Guillaume. That was fantastic. Can you see my first slide there okay? And can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see very well your screen.
Excellent. Thank you very much for inviting us to this fantastic meeting. I'd like to point out a couple of things as I begin this talk. I think that we're really on the verge of a revolution with nature, and we've never really had the capacity to be aware of so much information so quickly. And it will change the very fabric of how we approach the science of natural systems and their role in our society. Robotics is central to this revolution, so I'm really glad to be here. And I want to point out that it's the human and robotic interaction that really makes this something. As we began building this XPRIZE team, what I found is that no matter how much I thought or worked in a particular area, the greatest headway that we made through collaboration. And we made that when I would meet a new person, and that person brought a magic or a contribution or an incredible capacity to the team, it really shifted our abilities in a major way. And so I certainly want to thank Outreach Robotics and Guillaume Sharon and Hugh Levine and Julienne. Those guys came through and made a major difference for us. We had worked with a number of different people in robotics, and that team really changed our ability to access this competition, and largely responsible for our collection of such an incredible amount of data. A little about myself. I've always been an explorer, looking into wild places on the earth, and I went to the University of California in San Diego to study biology and learn about life. And when I was there, I learned a lot about surfing, which I really enjoyed. And I also discovered that a deep feeling that I had that the wild places on Earth, their future would depend as much on market forces of supply and demand as any other cause. And I changed my major to economics, and I focused on ecotourism as a way to add value to the wilderness. I was fortunate enough to find a job as a naturalist guide in Ecuador on the Napo River, where I spent 3 years living in a grass hut and translating the wisdom of the rainforest from local indigenous people to tourists. The local people were my constant companions and they were my friends. I was captivated by that rainforest. I returned home to earn a PhD in tropical butterflies at the University of Oregon with Dr. Phil DeVries. Later, as a professor, I have taken more than 11 groups of students to the tropics on 3-week adventures. It is an extraordinary, life-changing experience. If you have the chance to go to the rainforest and get deep into the field, you should go. When I first heard of the XPRIZE competition, I thought it was ridiculous. The idea of using drones to identify species in a rainforest seemed absurd to me, and I didn't think it was going to work. Slowly, I became a believer in the process and I started a team. The XPRIZE gave us some really important things. They gave us focus. I've noticed that as soon as a problem gets difficult to solve, people try to change the goal. It was amazing. The XPRIZE did not allow us to do that. The competition rules were set and it kept us on track. It also gave us validation. We were in this to save the rainforest. It validated our need to make a positive difference in the world, and it validated our willingness to take chances, to make risks, to make that happen. It also gave us an audience. The XPRIZE guaranteed that whatever we developed, a group of 10 scientists would take a very close look at that work and see what it could do to advance a very difficult field. And so I became a believer. I picked up the phone and started calling the most amazing people. And I couldn't even put them all on one slide, but every one of them was like a shining light of genius. And they wanted to do something good for the world. They wanted a chance to unleash their superpower. They wanted to do some good. And as I said, the cynics need not apply because our team is completely filled with optimists. We built a winning team of over 65 people from 12 or 13 different institutions around the world, and it was a really powerful experience. I wanted to highlight some of the key components of the solution that aren't always as obvious. We wanted our technology to support indigenous peoples and local communities, but it's not easy to figure out how thousands of dollars worth of species counting technology will help people who live in the rainforest and already know how to count species. We founded Selvitech. Selvitech is a model for how to help indigenous peoples take control of their own economies. The idea, we trained 5 local naturalist guides how to collect eDNA samples, how to deploy insect traps, and how to basically take up environmental consulting in their own areas. And we still continue to help them figure out how they can monetize that and bring income for their communities in the rainforest. A little about the prize itself. Probably many of you are curious what that outcome looks like. And this table sort of describes where the species came from that we identified. You'll see that eDNA from water was a very, very powerful tool. We identified over 1,000 taxa. Largely, this is because we were able to sample 54 liters of water. I think this tool is here to stay, but you'll notice that we also found some 300 species using the surface sampling tool that Outreach developed. And we found 215 using insect trap metabarcoding, which would be for the live trapped insects that were captured on the rafts. So these tools brought in a really good range of different kinds of taxa. I'd also like to focus on the last three that are listed on here, which include photographs of insects, the spatial acoustics, and the canopy tree monitoring. Whereas the first group of tools on there I see as being the future that's within reach for us right now. It's happening. These last tools are actually tools that not everybody is suspecting that I think are really going to change the way that we look at ecosystems. And to put in some perspective, at the turn of the century, I did my PhD work on tropical butterflies. I used slingshots, lead sinkers, and fishing line to pull fruit-baited traps into the canopy. It was hard work and it was dangerous. On average, I collected one butterfly per day per trap. At the XPRIZE finals, one canopy trap identified over 50,000 insects. That's over 250,000 insects across 5 drone-delivered traps. This is the revolution. It isn't about indicator species. It's about the entire ecosystem being absorbed through these electronic means. I was once told that insects were the absolute worst bioindicators on the planet because there were too many to count. There are too variable in space and time. We don't know even what many of them are, but today, with the help of the machine learning, insects will provide us with crystal clear, real-time image of what's really happening in a rainforest. We can't identify every one of them still, but what we can do is we can measure their biomass, their size, we can get an indication of their relative abundance, we can see which families and genera are represented more and how they vary in space and time. So the future of this we see as being statistics that we're probably not even using today to measure insect populations, which will become the foundation of our knowledge tomorrow. We've already used the tools built by Outreach Robotics to take this to scale. So we took 55 entocams deep into the most diverse rainforest on the planet at Tipitini Research Station in Ecuador, and we set them up in groups of 5 and measured spatial and temporal diversity for 10 days. In that period, we identified over 2 million insects in that area with over 661 taxa. What we did find is that those insect traps, those images, can distinguish existing microhabitats like Varsia and terra firma forests within a pristine tropical rainforest. We also, 1 month later, took 40 more of those traps deep into the Amazon at Yaguas National Park in a collaborative adventure with Conservation International to test out the technology for laying the groundwork for biodiversity credits to fund national parks. In that small space of time, over 5 days, we collected data on over 162,000 insects and over 200 taxa. And this work is still being developed with our verification tools, have brought us several hundred more taxa from those samples. A little about the trees. A fantastic component of our team is Etienne Laliberté's lab at the Plant Functional Ecology Lab at the University of Montreal, mapping trees from the canopy. Using off-the-shelf drones piloted by indigenous peoples, we've been able to map canopy trees by their size and their shapes and their densities. And in a square kilometer, we could find 23,000 trees in a little over an hour. This makes a 3-dimensional surface model that's constructed from the RGB images. And their lab has also developed techniques for autonomous close-up photographing of those plants. These images can then be identified by botanists, and that data set can be used to train the high elevation flyovers. We've been working on several locations around the world. One of them is the Tipitini Station, which does have one of the highest tree diversities in the world. From that location, we have over 5,000 photos, with well over half of them identified. As that database builds, we expect we'll be able to identify over 300 species by the end of this year from high-level flyovers. This will change the way that we understand tropical forests. Previously, we could only really know them from the 50-hectare plots that were completely sampled by botanists. Now we expect we'll be able to identify half of the stems in an area of about 1 square kilometer in a day. And this will be 15,000 trees identified to genus probably, and we hope 23,000 to 30,000 canopy crowns mapped as well. Some of this has been published in the Selvabox published data set recently by La Liberté's lab in our collaborative group. So soon that mystery of tropical rainforest will in fact look much more like a technicolor, well-identified ecological system. I'd also like to point out that the multidirectional microphone arrays provide a piece of information for studying endangered species that we have not yet been able to use. And that is that using these tools, we can identify the actual abundance of species, because when multiple birds are calling, one microphone cannot distinguish them. So with this tool, probably other animals in addition to birds, perhaps amphibians and mammals that make calls, can actually be mapped for their population density, which brings that really necessary information for species of strong interest for in population studies. And we demonstrated this for birds. We know we can follow flocks of birds, which we see on the left. We can follow individual birds, which we see on the right, and really take this to a new level as we bring this technology into production. So I'd like to thank you all for your attention today, and again like to remember that being part of a team is what much of this is about, and joining with others to share that collaborative information in places where the biology, the machine learning, and the robotics all join together to hopefully bring nature into clear focus for those of us in the rest of the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Guillaume. Very exciting and inspiring presentations. It brings me back to the sweat of the rainforest, but also, of course, the very a lot of excitement in bringing robots there and meeting everyone there for this competition. So I have some questions for you, and of course, I also remind the audience that the Q&A channel is open, so feel free to post so that I can also ask your questions to the speakers. Maybe I start with one question, that is, since we have the opportunity to have both a biologist and a roboticist here together, I would be curious to understand a bit about the challenges of bringing together so many different disciplines and point of view into the team, because as Thomas, you said, this is one of the key for success, but sometimes it's also not so simple. So what is your perspective?
I definitely think there were a tremendous amount of challenges here. I think that part of it is about the reasons that we bring people together. And I've noticed that, sometimes people come to a group like this because they have something and they want to use that thing. And I think that works really well. But I also think that it's key that as people that are helping to bring together those groups, that we focus on sort of what is the goal of the group and how can what the individual brings help move that forward. And sometimes there's an unwillingness to change what one's already doing, because if you have a hammer and a nail that you pound, you want to use that hammer for someone else's job. But I think the strength there is being able to get them to release their history of control over their space and experiment with it in a risky way in a way that might be able to inspire other collaborators. And that human characteristic, I mean, it's almost impossible to work on the team without it. They need to be able
Okay.
to get out of themselves and be able to say, okay, let's try it.
And
Okay.
it was a work in progress during all those years, I think. And one challenge I would say is on our side, on the robotic side, we want to try to keep things as simple as possible, not too complex because it brings up the risks of failure on the field. So we want to have things the most robust possible, but we still want to innovate, you know?
Mhm.
So, and sometimes we face belief of what's possible to do. And let me explain, like, sometimes it's taken for into account that everything on the cell phone is easy to do, easy to reproduce, and it's small, it works, like it takes very nice picture, but you want to develop something for insect that take pictures and says, hey, like why not I do something like a cell phone? And we have always to remind like cell phone has been built through like 20 years of development and multi-billion dollars and investment and engineering to get to that point. So what can we achieve in like 2 years to do custom things
Mhm.
to like custom sensors and stuff like that? It not everything is always easy and possible, and we need to kind of learn each other. Okay, what's the meeting ground there, and what's simple to do and accessible and innovative, and also what will perform well on the ground and be like the most effective to achieve the goals. So that's always kind of the discussion that was going on.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trade-off, and the tight time also of the competition. These 5 years, to some extent,
Mhm.
was forcing everybody to think, okay, what are really the technologies that are available? What is the technology readiness level so that they can be really deployed in the field in an effective way?
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
Yeah, there's a
so I
really
have two.
painful part there too, when you have to accept
Yeah,
that something isn't going to get any better. It's going to work, but it's not going to get better. And that is sometimes hard to accept, but it really did work.
uh, could you make an example of what of this?
Well, first time we met, Thomas
Mhm.
was like idea of Thomas was to kind of grip a tree trunk and sit the sensor on a tree trunk.
Okay.
And from my perspective, I already said, "Hey, Thomas, if we're in, we're not going to do that. It's too risky." I understand,
It's
like
too difficult.
from a
Yeah.
perspective from someone on the ground, oh, it looks like a pole that we can just grab on. But yeah, from a drone pilot, I was looking above and looking, okay, what can we use down there and what's easy to access? And it was the canopy of the forest. So
Kind of the phone. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So I have actually some questions here in the Q&A. So I would like to read them to you. So first of all, from Alan, we have well, first of all, absolute fantastic work. So what do you see as the pathway to scaling this impact? Who needs to support to get this scale? Obviously, this is almost unprecedented scale and information density, but still feels like it only captures a small part of the Amazon. Thomas and Guillaume, what do you think about scaling from the 100 hectares to more?
I, it is a real challenge. We're working on it daily. I guess the first thing I would say is that is the funding problem. And if anybody out there has a solution for that in the form of funding, I would love to see it. But I'm also learning about scaling in that, we sit here and I can imagine, let's just take canopy tree mapping, for example. Canopy tree mapping is amazing, and it can we could do this actually. I mean, I looked at it the other day. I could do 100 kilometers square in a week with a small team of indigenous people flying drones, and we could do this all over the Amazon. The problem is that you have to find a dreaming funding partner that really wants to take you from where you are today to an actual level of data and manufacturing that's probably in the millions of dollars. And probably to get there, my guess is it will not happen like this big jump. It will
Mm.
happen in a stepwise format. So I have to figure out what are the small steps that lead there. There has to be a need for each step along the way because if you're going to have this, you'd have to demonstrate clients, for example. And so showing clients will bring in people that might want to fund. And so creating that
Mhm.
each step of the way, as I think is the real challenge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think like drone delivery part might be a little way further down the road, and just proving those sensor you drop in the forest provides
Mhm.
actual useful data. That are the steps in between, and we might want to use drones at the end to scale that up and deploy them, but I'm not sure it's the first entry
The
level
first step,
step.
which is in some extent what you are already doing with the new pilots that you were showing us, Thomas, with the deployment of the sensors in different reserves.
Yeah, and we're choosing the ones that are easier. I mean, what's crazy is we are ready, like right now, we could develop a fleet of these rafts that could sample 50 rafts, put out 50 in a day, collect incredible amounts of data from the Amazon. And yet you're looking out there like who wants that data right now because
Yeah.
the market isn't quite ready. They don't really know what to do with it. So we have to get all the parts, like the demand has to be there for that
Mhm.
data so that we have a good reason to manufacture these things and the price will come down, of course, with manufacturing. But then, making 1,000 of them, somebody's got to want to buy them.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So the business model behind it's not trivial still. I have another question from the audience, from Tsitsi, which is also very interesting because one of the dimension of the XPRIZE was also the indigenous communities and the collaboration with them. And so the question is, could you share more about the lesson you have learned from working with indigenous communities? Notes, oh, sorry, it's moving. Uh, that were not expected. Also, do you have ethical concerns about revealing these species, which can then make them vulnerable to exploitation? That is, once people know what exists, then they might want to exploit this information, not always for good.
yeah, these are great questions. I think that um, we tried to work on this from a principled perspective that if Selvatech is a good example, I think we started more with the idea of the grant model that somebody would get a grant and then work with indigenous people and create um, products that would help communicate their communities and their value system. And I think that's still a very good pathway to use. And what I learned from that is that you know, each of these groups and we talked with the Warani, some of the Warani people, we talked to some of the Quechua people, and we talked with some of the anthropologists that work with them. And the values that they place on the forest can be very different than ours. They're not really species counters.
Yes.
They have these different uses and different religious attachments to parts of the forest. It was really interesting to learn about those components, the ideas about the forest that, for example, it's infinite. In Quechua culture, the forest itself is known as a provider of goods, and it's not something you can actually use up because it exists for them as a source of knowledge and food and existence. And I think those were really challenging things. I've also found that I think biodiversity credits are not been as productive as we would hope. And I
Mhm.
find that it's challenging to look at those groups of people and say, we want to sell you this technology so you can count your species. It's not that simple. We really have to go in there and learn what they value and then learn how our tools can help them. In some cases, it might be cases like if they wanted to document the impacts of a road, we could help them. But we're probably still going to need third parties to recognize the value of the diversity that's been lost. so that they might be able to use the legal system to recuperate losses that they may have endured as a result. So those are some ways as well. And I think in and in terms of the exploitation, I do think there's a concern there. We haven't yet identified things of that nature. Mostly what we're finding are things that are not actually very well known from the rainforest because we're looking below those sort of rare species that most people know about. So we haven't really encountered those potentials yet. I expect they're out there, and we should be very wary about sharing that information. And so when we work with those groups, we assume the information we collect for them belongs to them.
So the ownership of the data, which is very important.
Yeah, the primary ownership of data and the ability what to do with that data. Reporting on patterns, we feel like we can do, but individual species and species of value, I think that's information that they should retain.
Absolutely. You mentioned something interesting about the forest and it is infinite. And this was also a bit my sort of a feeling when I was there, because when I fly drone here in Switzerland above a forest, I go up and at a certain point the forest ends. But there we were flying 300 meters above the canopy and we could only see forest. It was really, really impressive, and you have really this impression of infiniteness in this environment. It was definitely amazing. One question to Guillaume, which is here in the chat, which is more related to the robotics part and about the automated landing from Ayung. So when the drone reconstructs the tree using the camera and identifies the optimal landing zone, what specific parameters are used in this process, and what was the reasoning behind choosing those parameters?
Yes, well, good question. And it was a master's project, and that was not my master, but there's a paper that has been just released on that, and you can kind of see it has been done. Like we recorded all parameters we could possibly record, and then we did that with a random, a choosing tree. I don't know the word in English, but a choosing tree where it kind of it explores like all the different parameters and see if there are some of them that stands out that results into a success. And I think in the end, I don't know them by heart, but in the end, there was like 5 of them that was mostly useful to identify a good landing spot. And the key there was to we could have like we could not make false detection. Like a false detection would lead to a drone crash. So we could allow to have few undetected areas. That's fine. As soon as at least the ones that we detected, we were like 100% sure they were correct. And we did run that also on trees that just ended in having no landing zone. That was a great sign. So let's say you have that possibility in the future to have autonomous scout in the forest. You want the robot to be able also to detect if there's no landing zone at all and it needs it to change to another tree. So that came good results. And here in Quebec, trees are very different in what we saw there. And I think in all northern hemisphere, it's kind of difficult to foresee a tree landing drone. But once you get there, it's more clear that it's a possibility. So we would not use that in Quebec, Canada, but definitely in Brazil. We could have many landing spots in that infinity you just described, Stefano. But I might be able to share that paper.
Yes, if you want to put the link in the chat, would be good. I think that
yes, I'll try to find
that
it.
would be perfect. And we are running out of time, so we have maybe a couple of minutes more just to close. I would be curious then to hear from you, Thomas, and Guillaume, sort of a hot take. So what do you remember from this competition, and what our community, if you have like one final message, what is important?
Go ahead, Thomas.
I think that the thing, from my view, I think that, choosing carefully the collaborators with whom you work and keeping, thinking about their value system, about their interests, about their care for other people and their care for the development of those people, I think is important. And to keep in touch with them. I mean, it's true, we've become great friends with the Outreach Robotics team, and it gets better every time we connect and we work on new things. And you find that everybody's working on new things. That growth, the sort of fountain of new creativity, is really a fantastic part of this. And I think that really came together for our team in the sense that, everybody was working independently, but they were all focused. Our focal point in this case was a list of species. Basically, everybody had to come up. I mean, they didn't each have to come up with a list of species, but their job was to get us that list of species. And I think they sort of knew where they fit in that challenge. And their sort of human interactions were really the basis of a tremendous amount of support and joy for many people. And I think taking a risk and doing one of these challenges and just accepting that we did all the way. I never thought we were going to win until it got close. And I was like, wow, we might actually win. But along the way, you just accept that, of course, you might completely fail, but failing together with people that agree that trying is better than not trying is very, very rewarding.
Yeah, rewarding. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Guillaume.
Yeah, and I just put the link to the paper in the chat.
Thank you.
A part of it is in French, so maybe you should translate or learn French. But on my side, I think it's mostly we're proud because like we're in Quebec, Canada, where it snows like 6 months per year, and we did develop those technology to be dropped into the Amazon rainforest, which I have never visited before in my lifetime. So I think you don't have to be shy to jump into new situations. And often, maybe like from my point of view, I don't see the rainforest as maybe Thomas sees it since he's passed a long time into it. And maybe sometimes it just brings a new perspective on how I see it and how we can use it to deploy those technologies. So it my takeaway there would be like not be afraid to jump into areas where you're not comfortable with because we did it and it worked and it was super it was a lifetime experience. So and I want to go back there as soon as I can and as often as I can. So it was a great opportunity that Thomas gave us. And also, there was other very good other teams there. I want to mention too, and Stefano, I'm aware of all your work too. So congrats for all of what you're doing. We always follow you and your work and your students.
Thanks.
So we should definitely meet in the future again.
Yeah, go back to the rainforest.
Yes,
hopefully.
why not?
Good. Thanks a lot. It's been really fantastic and really inspiring to hear from you. And of course, the audience feel free to get in touch with Thomas and Guillaume if you have other questions. And thanks again. And now we leave the floor to our next speakers and session. So we have a panel on built environment and efficiency via robotics. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.